Merry Christmas, everyone! This is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the Christmas Special Retrospectives. And once again, we're going to be talking about A Christmas Carol. So, last year, we looked at the Bill Murray version of A Christmas Carol called Scrooge. Back then, I thought it was actually a pretty damn good movie, and I still think it's a pretty damn good movie. I thought it was really funny, I liked the acting, I liked the story, I love how it adapted to Christmas Carol. Overall, I thought it was just a damn good movie overall. But as I said last year, there are a lot of different versions of A Christmas Carol, and I always put A Christmas Carol in the Christmas polls, so, well, last year, another version of A Christmas Carol went out. Specifically, one that's on the animated side of this spectrum with Bah Humduck, A Looney Tunes Christmas. Now, here's the strange thing with this one, sort of. This is actually not the first time that Looney Tunes has tackled A Christmas Carol. The first time they did, it was actually in one of their classic cartoons, and that one had Yosemite Sam playing the role of Ebenezer Scrooge, while Porky Pig was his resident Bob Cratchit. And, well, in that version of the story, it wasn't Scrooge being visited by the ghost of Christmas that made him want to change his ways. No, it was Bugs Bunny fucking with him. Yeah, what happened in that version was that Bugs had somehow wound up in the middle of Scrooge's counting house, befriended Bob Cratchit, wound up screwing with Scrooge to try and get Bob some extra benefits. Scrooge saw Bob taking those benefits, decided to fire him for his troubles, take everything that he owned, and then basically Bugs didn't like that, so he started screwing with Scrooge on Christmas Eve, and made him believe that because he was such an asshole that he was just going straight to hell. And as a result, that scared Scrooge into wanting to change, and, well, everything, you kind of get what I'm saying. However, this version of the story does follow the more traditional dynamic of A Christmas Carol, of a sort. The original definitely tried staying true to the source material, at least in setting and character roles, but this one basically just has a completely different setting, with the characters, for the most part, taking the roles of themselves. With that said, do I think that this version of A Christmas Carol holds up? Do I think it's worth watching every year for Christmas? Well, let's take a look at it and find out. This year, we're taking a look at Bah Humduck, A Looney Tunes Christmas. So, let's get to our long-ass plot summary. In this case, the Scrooge for this story is Daffy Duck, who is, like I said, taking the role of Daffy Duck. How he is a Scrooge is that he is the owner of a megastore called the Lucky Duck Superstore, and it basically sells everything that you want, and, well, since it's a Christmas movie, obviously the busy season is around the corner, so people are shopping till they drop, and Daffy is taking full advantage of that, tripling the prices on all their stock, basically overworking his employees so that they'll be there for every customer's need, and anytime any of them show even the slightest hint of neglect for their work, i.e. slacking off or just doing things for themselves, he gets on their case and tells them to knock that shit off and get back to work. Which is not exactly helpful for a lot of employees because they're all dealing with their own troubles. Like, Wile E. Coyote is constantly hungry because he doesn't get enough to eat. Elmer Fudd has apparently been working 36 straight hours with triple shifts, so he's barely gotten any sleep. And Marvin the Martian, who for some reason works there despite being a Martian, is homesick and just wants to go home. So all of them are having their own troubles. Daffy, however, does not give a shit, as he just goes around on his little hover scooter, because apparently when you're rich you can afford that shit, and basically just tells them all that they're slacking off and need to get back to work. And the one who most especially gets his abuse is the Bob Cratchit analog for the story, Porky Pig, who's the assistant manager for the store, or assistant manager. He gets demoted pretty early on. And basically what Porky wants is that he wants to get his daughter, a young girl named Priscilla, a doll called the Pretty Pudgy Piggy doll. It's all she wants for Christmas, and while he could have gotten it with the original price, well, like I said, Daffy tripled the price on everything, including the doll. He can no longer afford it, and he barely eats as it is because, like any other Bob Cratchit analog, Daffy is not paying him a lot of money. Thing is, though, Daffy gives zero shits about any of this. He does not give a damn that his employees are suffering. He doesn't give a damn that they're hungry. He doesn't give a damn they're not getting enough sleep. All he cares about is the bottom line. And the bottom line is more money, boy. So he basically just abuses them at every chance he gets, while also sustaining various abuses because this is still a Looney Tunes cartoon. However, one of the people that ends up kind of giving Daffy some flack is, well, Bugs Bunny, as he is in the store doing some last-minute Christmas shopping, and of course he's buying a lot because rabbits have big families, and, well, he sees how much Daffy is mistreating his employees, and so while Daffy lets him stay in the store because, well, he's a prospective buyer and he's obviously going to spend a lot of money, well, when Bugs tries giving him the business, as Bugs is wont to do, and Daffy pretty much just wants him out of his sight. However, Bugs does give Daffy a little warning that he better be careful when when screwing with the holidays, because if he's especially nasty, then well, there's a chance he'll be visited by the ghosts of Christmas, which Daffy just kind of brushes off and thinks it's malarkey. And so with Bugs even saying, "Well then, bah humduck to you," and Daffy hears that and thinks, "You know what? I'll take that," as he thinks the phrase sounds good, so he wants to use it more regularly. As such, Daffy ends up going to his office with Porky once more pleading for the doll, with Daffy obviously shutting the door in his face. But when Daffy gets to his office and looks at his profit margins, that's when the Christmas Carol portion begins. As Daffy is visited by this movie's version of Jacob Marley. In this case, it's Sylvester the Cat, or his alias in this continuity, Sylvester the Investor. Apparently, he was a big-time CEO of a megastore conglomerate called Cat's Meow, and he basically just made a crap ton of money at the expense of his employees. And Daffy looked up to him; he was his idol. Unfortunately, though, a year prior to this special, well, he died. Why? Because apparently he pissed off his employees so much that one of them squashed him with a forklift 9 times. So, yeah, he's dead now. And he's pretty much here to tell Daffy, get your shit together, you're gonna end up just like me. Of course, Daffy brushes it off because he's Daffy. He doesn't have to deal with that shit. And he's not stupid enough to let his employees operate forklifts. But Sylvester realizes that Daffy really does need to get this nailed into him. And so, as usual with most Jacob Marley analogs, he tells Daffy that he's going to be visited by 3 spirits that night. As such, he flies off, and Daffy just spends the remainder of the day, well, being an asshat. His employees come to him with requests to try and make the jobs easier. He brushes them off, and in Porky's case, he yells at him, "Bah humduck," for his troubles. And basically, the day keeps going on, the money keeps piling up, and Daffy, of course, is just reveling in it. As such, when closing time for the store comes around, Daffy, deciding to be an extra large dick, ends up making an announcement to the store, stating that for the shopping convenience of all their customers, the store is going to be open on Christmas, and it's going to be open from 5 a.m. to midnight. So basically, everyone in the store is going to be working and not seeing their family, So yeah, no one's happy about that. As such, everyone leaves the store, and Daffy does get ready to leave, but Sylvester's words do begin haunting him. However, he doesn't really get that far, as after he leaves his office, he goes to, I guess, the secretary's area right outside his office, and who should he run into but Bugs, who's just kind of sitting there. Daffy wonders why the hell he's here, and Bugs tells him that they can't get out. There's a massive snowdrift blocking the exit, so they can't leave till 5 in the morning tomorrow. As such, Daffy realizes that he kind of needs to find a place to hunker down, and so he decides he's going to hide in his vault, though he does tell Bugs that if anyone comes in that looks spooky, ethereal, or is floaty, to not let them through. But of course, it's Bugs. Even if that happened, he would let them through, because Bugs kind of wants to screw with an asshole. Regardless, though, Daffy does end up hunkering down in his vault, even welds the door shut so that nothing can get in. But these are fucking ghosts. They'll get in no matter what. And as such, after Daffy gets into his nightwear, he's soon visited by the first of the 3 spirits, the Ghost of Christmas Past. Or in this case, the Ghosts of Christmas Past, as the Ghost of Christmas Past in this version is encapsulated by Tweety Bird and Granny, and they have no kind words for Daffy, as they pretty much just tell him he's an asshole, he mistreats his employees, and then Granny proceeds to beat him with a candy cane. I have to remind you, this is a Looney Tunes cartoon. Regardless, as the Ghost of Christmas Past, they take Daffy on a journey whether he likes it or not. And as such, they take him back in time, back to when he was a child. And it turns out that Daffy actually grew up in an orphanage called the Lucky Duck Orphanage. And, well, I will give the special this. In one short scene, they do showcase why Daffy is as much of an asshole as he is. Because, well, he had no family. Which before you say, oh, he grew up in an orphanage, no shit. No, I mean, even in an orphanage, there are prospective parents that come by and adopt children. And every year, people would come by and adopt all the other kids, while Daffy was always left on the wayside. No matter how much he tried to impress the parents or show them how wow he was always just looked over and always just spent another year at the orphanage. And it basically just added up to the point where he just felt lonely. He just wanted a family, and it never happened. And it basically explains why Daffy is the way he is. He had no one to care for him, no one to love him. and he basically just hardened his heart so that he wouldn't be hurt anymore, hence why he's such a big asshole and has very little to no empathy for anyone. Of course, Granny and Tweety are sympathetic enough to this, but say it's not an excuse for Daffy to be a jerk in the present. However, Daffy, while clearly feeling emotions for his tragic childhood, this doesn't compel him to want to change his ways. If anything, he tries making a proposal to Granny and Tweety, saying that maybe they should go back in time to the day before and make a few bets on a horse race, and they'll be loaded in minutes. And yeah, Daffy and Granny and Tweety are just like, yeah, he's not going to change, and then proceed to knock him right back to his office in the present day. And sure enough, that's when the second ghost arrives, announced by intercom, thanks to Bugs. And well, thus we meet this special's version of the Ghost of Christmas Present, who in this case is played by Yosemite Sam, and just like Granny before him, he gives Daffy a good ass whooping because he just thinks he's such a jerk. Regardless, though, like other versions of the Ghost of Christmas Present, he does try to take Daffy around to see what he's missing out on in life, which actually does lead to a good bit of slapstick where he tells Daffy to hold onto his robe so he'll be able to slide so that'll be able to phase through objects, and they don't get very far before his robe rips and Daffy just ends up plummeting to the earth and smacking his head on a fire hydrant. Which doesn't turn allow him to see a sleeping Elmer Fudd, who didn't even make it past the front door before passing out on the street. But yeah, from there, Yosemite Sam does take Daffy around and shows him the plights of his other employees, more specifically Marvin the Martian and Porky Pig. And while Marvin's longing for his home does little to nothing for Daffy, it's when they visit Porky's house that Daffy does start showing a twinge of emotion. It starts out like with the other visits, with Daffy basically being resistant to change and basically not feeling any empathy for anybody. Although he does enter the house via a toilet because he wound up in the sewer, so whatever. But when Daffy does see Porky and his daughter Priscilla talking, well, Priscilla asks her dad why Daffy is such a jerk, and Porky hits the nail on the head. That Daffy doesn't have anyone to care about him, no family, no one to love him. And when Daffy hears Porky actually encapsulate the source of his self-loathing, anger, and greed, it does start to affect Daffy, especially when he sees Priscilla and Porky still actually showing a genuine father-daughter bond. And it goes even further as Porky and Priscilla see a star outside, and they end up making a wish on it, with Priscilla wishing that she would get her pretty pudgy piggy doll. But above all else, she just wants to spend Christmas with her father. And so as Porky leaves, you can tell that Daffy was starting to feel something there. Not like, okay, even Daffy admits later that he didn't actually didn't actually get there all the way, but it was the start of something. Although it is interrupted by the fact that Yosemite Sam decides to keep beating Daffy because Daffy is still such an asshole and he's still refusing to give Priscilla the doll, and eventually Yosemite Sam does end up kicking him right back to his office, but again, it's clear that this display of emotion between Porky and his daughter was starting to have an effect on Daffy. However, when Daffy gets back to his office, he goes out to see Bugs, who's still in the secretary area, as Bugs is putting up a Christmas tree, and while the two of them talk, with Daffy reflecting on that he was beginning to feel something, well, Bugs warns Daffy that he better be careful, because he hears the last ghost, the doozy, and when Daffy remembers that, yeah, he was promised 3 spirits, he sees a black smoke emanating from his office, as well as a snarling sound coming from in there. And of course, while Bugs tries to amscray, Daffy begs him to hide him, which leads to some genuinely fun antics, where Bugs, of course, abuses Daffy via the various appliances in the store. But eventually, this abuse ends with Daffy in front of a whole array of widescreen TVs, and appearing on the screens of all those TVs is the Ghost of Christmas Future, who in this case is played by the Tasmanian Devil. Odd choice, but whatever. Oh, hold on 1 second. Pause, damn you. Sorry about that. Forgot to silence my phone. That's on me. But anyway, the Tasmanian Devil, of course, takes Daffy to his Christmas future, and as you do, it's bleak, scary, and basically not good for Daffy. As they arrive in a cemetery, with Daffy even saying he has more of a Halloween-y vibe than a Christmas vibe, and in the cemetery is Porky and Priscilla, and of course the grave they're visiting is Daffy's grave. How did he die? I don't know. Maybe he got crushed by a forklift too. Maybe a shelf fell on him. I don't know. He went through a lot of abuse in the first act of the movie. I'm surprised that anything can kill him. Regardless, though, he's dead now, and basically nobody gives a shit about him, like in most versions of A Christmas Carol. And on top of that, when Daffy died, he tried to leave the store to himself in his will. But you can't leave a property to a dead man, and as a result, the store wound up getting shut down, and all of Daffy's employees are now out of a job. With the only real silver lining of the whole thing being that now that they're out of a job, they can at least spend Christmas with their families. As such, Porky and Priscilla do wish Daffy well, I guess, as they say Merry Christmas, or Bah Humduck, as you like to say, and wander off. And of course, Daffy kind of does what most versions of Scrooge do, as he pleads with the Ghost of Christmas Future to not let this happen. He doesn't want to end up lonely and alone and all that stuff, which is kind of redundant to say both at the same time. But Daffy does, so I'm going to as well. But then something different happens in this version. Priscilla comes back. She goes to Daffy's grave, and she's holding a plate of cookies. And this is also where we get a genuinely sweet reaction, as Priscilla talks about how she understands why Daffy was as greedy and mean as he was. That he was lonely, that he didn't have anybody there for him. And she understands that, most likely because her mother's dead. Yeah, Porky mentioned that he's her only family. But Priscilla promises Daffy that even now when he's in the grave, he won't be alone. She'll come visit him every year because, well, Christmas is the one time of the year when everyone's family. And she will not abandon him. And so she places the cookies down on his grave and wishes him a Merry Christmas. And yeah, seeing this does kind of finally do it for Daffy, as for the first time in his life, he feels empathy. He feels love. And it makes him and he realizes at that moment, I want to change. And so he does genuinely ask the Tasmanian Devil if he can have a second chance, which resulted in him getting chucked out of the graveyard for his troubles. But sure enough, when he arrives back in the present day, alive and well, and as most versions of Scrooge do, he of course has a new outlook on life. As he does solve Elmer Fudd outside, confirms it's Christmas Day, and he basically decides, I'm going to turn my life around. As he promises Elmer Fudd a vacation in Hawaii to rest up, but he also asks for Elmer's help because they have some work to do. And as such, the both of them run back into the store, and so 5 o'clock comes around. Daffy's employees all come to work that day. And sure enough, the entire store is decked top to bottom in Christmas memorabilia, with Daffy himself even wearing a Santa outfit. From there, he basically goes to all of his employees, giving them exactly what they want. He gives Wile E. Coyote his own personal chef, so he never goes hungry. He gives Marvin the Martian a racket that so he can get back home. He gives presents to all of his other employees. He even gives Porky's daughter, because apparently Porky brought her in so that she wouldn't be alone on Christmas, the pretty Pudgy Piggy doll, and so many accessories that I'm surprised that I'm surprised that it's not in excess. It probably is in excess. It's too much, is what I'm saying. Point is, he's going overboard. And on top of that, he not only promotes Porky to full manager, but he also is telling everybody that they're going to be getting a paid vacation and a raise, which everybody is so happy for. And as such, they just start partying. All the employees enjoy themselves, get some drinks, open presents. Even Pepe Le Pew at one point manages to get under the mistletoe with that cat he's constantly hounding, and she basically pulls him in for the kiss. It's actually kind of nice. And we even get a moment where Porky and Priscilla do go up to Daffy and ask him if maybe for Christmas if he'd like to be a part of their family, which Daffy's okay with. Though after this, we do get a moment where Daffy starts to backpedal a little, as he looks around and sees everyone happy, enjoying the holidays, and he's realizing that all this money he's spending on all this frivolous shit is going to drive him broke. And as such, he begins trying to calculate ways to reverse the situation. That maybe he should take the races back, or take back all the presents. But all it takes is Priscilla going up to him and offering him cookies that look exactly like the ones from the vision from the future, and Daffy just puts all those thoughts to bed. He leans down, and Priscilla calls him Uncle Daffy. He's like, Uncle? And she gives him a quick peck on the cheek. He's like, yeah, okay, Uncle. And from there, we see the Ghost of Christmas watching from the rafters, happy that Daffy has changed, and the special ends with Bugs looking to the audience, wishing them a happy holidays, where Porky and his daughter do the typical, that's all, folks, and there you go. That was Bah Humduck, a Looney Tunes Christmas, and my thoughts on this special? Okay, so like with Scrooge last year, I look at this special from two distinct points of view. The first point of view is from a Looney Tunes cartoon perspective, and the second point of view is looking at it as a Christmas Carol adaptation. Now, as a Looney Tunes cartoon, I actually think this is fun. It's not like the best thing I've ever seen with a Looney Tunes name on it, but it's Looney Tunes, and it's actually done pretty damn well. The animation is actually pretty nice. The voice acting, for the most part, I think is really damn good. And with the only exception that I didn't like was, ironically, Billy West as Bugs Bunny. I don't know why. I don't know why. It's not that his inflections are bad, and Billy West is a great actor. It's just that for whatever reason, it just didn't seem like the voice matched for Bugs Bunny. He tries his best, don't get me wrong, and he does that, and his line delivery is perfect. It's just, I don't know, it didn't seem to fit in my opinion. But regardless, that's like a nitpick among a bunch of other stuff that I did like. I think, like I said, animation really good, the voice acting was good, and the slapstick, I laughed quite a bit actually. I thought the slapstick in the special was genuinely fun. It was hilarious. Seeing Daffy get constantly abused throughout the first third of the movie was a joy to witness. The jokes all the personal jokes at his expense are great. The slapstick bits that could only work through animation were hilarious, like seeing Daffy get thrown around the store when Porky accidentally knocks into him because he slipped on some water and got thrown around the store while up in women's underwear, and then smacked into Daffy, resulting in both of them falling into a giant Christmas tree in the middle of the store. It was great when all the employees were leaving for the night. One of the employees, the security guard, which was that big orange monster whose name I don't remember, was told by Daffy over the intercom he has to punch out. So what does he do? He punches the intercom and punches Daffy right in his office with Daffy's bill flying over, and Daffy's like, I asked for that. Which, I love it. Again, the slapstick is on point. Even when Daffy is visited by the spirits of Christmas, the slapstick there is genuinely funny. And it's kind of cathartic seeing this asshole get his comeuppance both before and during his visits with the spirits. So there is some genuine humor in there. And of course, Daffy and Bugs still make for a fun comedy duo, as Bugs still is not cutting Daffy any slack for how much of an asshole he is. Through every one of their interactions, Bugs is not flinching, does not give a damn. He just plays the game and just revels in seeing Daffy lose it. When he shows Daffy the long list of his relatives, and Daffy has literal dollar signs in his eyes, Bugs just takes this opportunity to start abusing him, because he knows that even if Daffy doesn't want to look at him right now, he's gonna let him stay in the store, because what Daffy prioritizes above all is money. So he's just gonna take advantage of that, as he has Daffy try out a bunch of presents he's getting for his family, which I love. It's great. And even that, there's even a funny joke later where after Daffy is visited by Sylvester, Bugs comes out of nowhere, and Daffy asks what he's doing there, and he says, "Well, I asked the guy in the helmet downstairs if he knew where I could find some cheap skates, and he sent me up here." It was, I don't know. That's a great gag right there. But again, those are still good. But of course, I think my favorite comedy bit is still the prelude to the visit from the Ghost of Christmas Future, when Daffy asks Bugs to hide him, and Bugs, being Bugs, just abuses him, throws him in a washer and dryer, puts him in a train, and as the train crashes, launches him out of a bow and arrow into some TVs. It's just some good fun slapstick. I think it's just genuinely nice. I love it. So in that regard, I think this special does work as a Looney Tunes cartoon. It's silly, it's over the top, it's fun. It's just Looney Tunes at its best, and overall is just a joy to watch, and it's just a joy to watch for the silly and fun stuff. But then I look at this special as a Christmas Carol adaptation, and if I'm going to judge it solely based on those merits, yeah, I don't like saying this, because again, overall, this is not a bad special. I think it's pretty good overall. But oddly enough, the Christmas Carol portion of the special is where it kind of falters a little. Now, I'm not saying that it falls flat completely, as there are things in this that I do genuinely enjoy and can at least compliment them for trying. It's just that compared to other versions of A Christmas Carol, I feel like this one doesn't hit the mark as well. So, okay, let me explain. The Visits from the Ghost of Christmas. Now, something that has happened with most versions of A Christmas Carol is that, well, the Ghosts of Christmas tend to still give Scrooge some flack. Overall, the point of their visits is to help Scrooge but they know how much of an asshole he is, and thus, while they are trying to get him to change his ways, there are points where some barb is thrown in their interactions. Like, the most prominent ones obviously come the Ghost of Christmas Present in most versions, as while he's the biggest and jolliest of the three ghosts, he's also the most critical of Scrooge because he's meant to be the spirit of Christmas, and Scrooge's actions throughout the years were the antithesis of Christmas. He was uncaring towards other people, was willing to let others die if it meant that he didn't have to hand out his money. He was just a jerk in every sense of the word, and so of course the Ghost of Christmas Present had words for him and let him know how disappointed he was. And to even further emphasize that, there was want and ignorance, so which those two obviously were big ones for Scrooge, because he was basically throwing these two suffering children right in his these two suffering children were thrown in his face, and he was like, "Oh my God, that's awful." But when it came down to it, but even with the barbs thrown in, the overall purpose of the Ghost of Christmas were to help Scrooge. Even last year when we talked about Scrooge, while the Ghost of Christmas in that version definitely gave Frank a lot more shit and delighted in his torment, their goal at the end of the day was still to try and help him. They brought Frank around to all these places in his past, present, and future to try and give him perspective and allow him the chance to come to his own conclusions and naturally change on his own. Yeah, they had to push him a little in a few areas, like obviously the Ghost of Christmas Present gave Frank some shit because what was going on because his secretary was obviously making a very little money and her family was still happy, and of course the Ghost of Christmas Present had to kind of shove that in Frank's face a little. But overall, they showed him. But overall, again, their end goal was just to show Frank these things and allow him to come to his own conclusions. Again, maybe with some pushes here and there, but overall it had to be Frank who wanted to change. These ghosts, however, not so much. I complimented the slapstick for all of the Ghosts of Christmas because, well, it's Looney Tunes, slapstick is what they do best. But, unfortunately, the slapstick, I feel, is a little counterintuitive to what the Ghosts of Christmas were attempting to do with Daffy in this version. Like I said, like with every version of A Christmas Carol, the end goal of the ghost is to make Daffy want to change. But the Ghosts of Christmas in this version are more concerned with punishing him or being an asshole than wanting him to genuinely change. And they just sort of think that by scolding Daffy and showing him all the things that he's suffering, or showing him the consequence of his actions or why he's suffering, will make him want to change. The only problem is that doesn't apply. That those things don't work with Daffy. Here's the thing. One of the things that I will give compliments to the special for is that you do get a pretty good idea of why Daffy is the way he is. And here's the thing. They do showcase that why he's a bit more resistant to wanting to change than other versions of Scrooge are. Because he had nobody. No matter the version of A Christmas Carol, Scrooge did have people in his life that he genuinely cared about. And by being shown those people in his life via the Ghost of Christmas Past, it gave him a bit more perspective. Like, his visit meeting his little sister Fran allowed Scrooge to see the brief bit of happiness in his life and reflect on what Fran left behind in the form of his nephew Fred, which in turn allowed Scrooge to get some more perspective on his relationship with his nephew. Likewise, seeing Scrooge's relationship with his old boss Fezziwig allowed him to reflect on how he treats his employee Bob Cratchit, as Fezziwig was a great boss, and yet Scrooge treats Bob Cratchit like he's nothing. And then, of course, there's Belle, one of the most important connections in Scrooge's life. She was the love of his life. But as Scrooge began slowly drifting away from caring about others and more about the bottom line of money, then Belle began drifting away from him as well, to the point where she finally broke up with him, and Scrooge did nothing to stop it, which in turn allowed present-day Scrooge to reflect on his regrets, and combined with the perspective he got with seeing his sister and Fezziwig, allowed him to realize that allowed him to start getting the pieces in place for wanting to become a better person. In this version, however, in this version of the story, however, Daffy did not have such connections. The reason why Daffy is as much of an asshole as he is in the present day is because he had nobody. He grew up alone. He lived in an orphanage. Every year, parents came by and nobody wanted him. And so to cope with this, he began closing himself off, getting greedy, wanting to just have more and more. Hell, it's even emphasized in one of the gags in the special, as the only Christmas present that Daffy receives throughout the entire special is a gift from himself, which subsequently was a remote that remote controlled his office, so that was kind of funny. But when it came down to it, Daffy basically has no empathy for anybody, which it basically comes down to, no one else showed empathy for me. Why should I show empathy towards anybody else? It's why, even though he does tear up when he sees his unhappy childhood, it doesn't do anything for him. All it does is remind him of why he is the way he is, and just reaffirms that what he's doing is probably the right call, because being alone hurts like hell. And it's even in the present day, when he's shown the plights of his employees, he still doesn't care. Why should he care? He knows he's making them suffering. He knows that he knows he treats them like crap. One of the jokes in the special was, after Sylvester told him you're going to be visited by 3 spirits, he said, "Wait, who put you up to this? Was it the rabbit, or did my subordinates hire you so I start treating them with more dignity?" So he knows he's treating them like shit. He just doesn't care. He does not give a shit what their plights is. They could have stubbed their toe on the way into work, or their parents could be dead. All he cares about is that they show up for work and do their job. If they're suffering, who cares, as long as they're getting the job done. That's all he cares about. He does not have empathy for anybody. And oddly enough, that's where the thing is, that's why he's so hesitant to change. And again, I compliment them to the special for this, because there is an explanation for why Daffy is so resistant to change. But going back to the Ghost of Christmas and how they constantly chastise Daffy and are trying to get him to change by basically punishing him for being an asshole, well, that doesn't help the matters. One of the reasons why the visits from the spirits are so integral in so many other versions, like I said, was because the ghost had to let Scrooge come to his own conclusions. Yes, they did have to push it in certain areas, and even force it sometimes to try and make him feel guilty for what he was doing. But ultimately, they had to let the images speak for themselves. They had to let Scrooge come to his own conclusions. Seeing the connections he had in the past allowed him to reflect on the connections he has in the present. Seeing the things he's missing out on in the present allowed Scrooge to reflect on his actions and how he truly was as a person. And seeing what he saw in the future allowed Scrooge to truly see the consequences of being the person he was, and ultimately be the final clincher to make him want to go and become a better person. But in the case of the Ghost of Christmas in this version, they basically think that if they just yell at Daffy and try and force him to have empathy for others, that he'll be open to it. But the thing is, the opposite is true. Daffy looks at all the people that he causes to suffer, and he's like, why should I give a shit about these people? And of course, if you're having a point forced down your throat, it makes you less resistant to listen to it. It's part of why the whole visit to the past did nothing for him, aside from the fact that all they did was just show Daffy that he had a unhappy childhood, and I don't think anybody would care about that. It's why when he's shown the plight of Elmer, Marvin the Martian, and Porky, that he almost feels nothing for them. Even in the visit to the future, when he sees that he's dead and nobody gives a shit about him, while he pleads for his life like in most other versions of A Christmas Carol, it's less because he doesn't want to be alone and more that he just doesn't want the Ghost of Christmas Future to leave him like this and dead. He's more afraid for his own safety than how he affected everybody else. So, and again, combine that with the fact that the ghosts are constantly just trying to force him to see the light, it doesn't help. And as a result, it makes the visits with them not really have any weight to them. Which I think is a problem. And before you say, well, obviously they couldn't, this is like how long is this special? It's a 46-minute special. So obviously they don't have as much time to focus on the ghosts in this version as they are in other versions. Well, to that I'm going to call bullshit, because I have seen shorter versions of A Christmas Carol still hit the mark in that regard. And if you want me to give one example, Mickey's Christmas Carol. That version was a much more abridged version of A Christmas Carol, yet it still hit all the main points. If you want another example, the Team Star Kid did their own version of A Christmas Carol called a VHS Christmas Carol, and it was the original story of A Christmas Carol condensed and turned into and basically played 80s synth music, and that version still hit all the main points perfectly. So if you're trying to say that length is what ultimately inhibits the special from being a good Christmas Carol adaptation, then I'm going to call bullshit on that. Because regardless of how short these things are, they can still hit all the main points and still hit them well. And so I think if going back to Mickey's Christmas Carol, that still had all the. Okay, I'm getting off topic again. My point is the special doesn't really spend as much time focusing on the spirits as they do in other versions, and I think that's a detriment to the special. By having the visit with the Ghost of Christmas Past be so brief, it doesn't really allow any time for things to settle in. The Ghost of Christmas Present is over in almost 5 minutes. And while that does start getting the ball rolling on Daffy wanting to change, it doesn't really get there all the way. And even the Ghost of Christmas Future, is literally just Daffy seeing his gravestone, which I'm gonna call a nitpick I have for most versions of A Christmas Carol. For some reason, every version seems to or most versions seem to think that would horrify Scrooge the fact that he's dead, and he's in a grave. But no, it's not just the sight of the gravestone that scares Scrooge in the visions from the future. It's the fact that he knows that when he dies, nobody's gonna give a shit about him, and all he caused was suffering. Bob Cratchit's family is suffering because Tiny Tim died, and he died because Bob didn't make good salary and thus couldn't pay for proper medical care. He sees how everyone laughs at him after his death. The only emotion that comes of it are people happy that he's dead, so they have more time to pay their own debts. His junk is hawked off for pennies. Basically, it's the consequences of his death that Scrooge is most afraid of. But in this case, however, while they do showcase the consequences enough, again, what Daffy most cares about is the fact that he's dead. And when he pleads to the Ghost of Christmas Future at first, he doesn't really want it. He's not really pleading because he wants to change. He's pleading because he doesn't want to die. Hold on one second. I need to get something in my throat. Sorry about that. But like I said, because of how quick the visits with the spirits go by, it really does not give any time for them to have emotional weight. While there are moments in there that have emotional weight, it doesn't really do much for actually furthering Daffy's character and making him want to change. And beating the shit out of him, while funny, is not really conducive to making him want to become a better person. And I think part of the fault in that is just with how late in the game the Ghost of Christmas visits came. The first half of this special is dedicated to showing Daffy being an asshole in his megastore. And like I said, while the comedy antics that come from that are funny, because they more focus on that versus actually trying to further along Daffy's character, it doesn't lead to as much heartfelt moments as we need. We need to have those moments, especially for an adaptation of A Christmas Carol, because those moments are what helps Scrooge want to change. And by overemphasizing the comedic aspects and abusing Daffy and yelling at him and punishing him for being an asshole, it makes the moments where he actually does feel actual emotion and want to change not carry as much weight. I'm not saying that they are weightless. They just don't mean as much in comparison to other versions of A Christmas Carol, which does also lead to another complaint I have: Daffy's change. It is way too quick. What made Daffy start feeling genuine empathy for people was when in the vision of the future he saw Priscilla promising to come visit his grave. And to give another comment to this special, I actually like how it's those moments that make Daffy genuinely want to change. In the case of when Daffy sees Porky and his daughter, and they talk about why Daffy is as much of an asshole as he is, the moment that actually does start making Daffy begin feeling at least a twinge of empathy for Porky and his family is the fact that Porky understands him. Porky knows why Daffy suffers, even if he doesn't know exactly what, even if he didn't know anything about his tragic past. But Porky knows that Daffy is lonely. And when Daffy hears this, it does start making him a bit more open to seeing Porky. Yeah, he's still trying to keep arm's length a little, but it's like if you shut the door in someone's face, but then you open up the window, so you can still this allows Daffy to start being more open to Porky's plight. And so when Porky and his daughter wish on a star that Porky be able to spend time with his daughter on Christmas Day, it does start having an effect on Daffy, because for once, he feels envious for someone, because Porky has the one thing he doesn't: a family that loves him. And as a result, and this is what starts getting the gears turning in Daffy, in Daffy's mind. And what ultimately makes Daffy want to change is when he's shown the genuine affection that he had been missing for years. As in his future, despite the fact that almost nobody gives a shit that Daffy died, Priscilla does. She knows why he suffers, and she wants to be there for him. She says that she'll visit his grave every year. She'll treat him like she'll see him as family. And Daffy hears that and thinks, maybe I do have something to change for. And I like that. I actually like that. I like that that's the impetus for why Daffy wants to change. Because ultimately, Daffy is shown that the whole reason why he's a jerk, like I said, is that he just didn't have anyone. So to actually start forming a human connection with people and actually starting to feel the love he had been missing for so long, of course that's why he decides to change. It's not, and I think that that's a really sweet version. Even going back to that, in the climax of the movie when Daffy almost backpedals and almost takes everything back because he thinks he'll go broke, what makes him put it all to bed is when Priscilla actually does treat him like family because, well, Porky said that they were family. Because Porky said for Christmas he could be a part of their family, and yeah, words are nice, but actions speak louder than words, and all it took was Priscilla showing Daffy some genuine love and affection that made him decide, yeah, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with being the good guy right now. I like that. It's nice. That's actually sweet. The problem, however, is that one moment of empathy does not a good person make. And that's another problem I have with this version. Most other Christmas Carol had the changes be gradual, even if they were subtle. Even if there were some where Scrooge was more indignant, you could tell that there was change still going. Hell, even in the BBC FX version of A Christmas Carol, which I do not like, they did show that Scrooge was going through changes and was gradually coming out of his own shell. So there was at least something in there to show that Scrooge was growing as a person. And even in Scrooge last year, while Frank was still a snarky asshole, what the spirits were showing him in that movie was having an effect on him, and it was causing him to act out and become a different person even before all the visits were done. It's just that the Ghost of Christmas Future's visions did finalizing everything and finally made Frank just turn his life around completely. In this version, however, we didn't have that with Daffy. Rather, instead of showcasing the process of him gradually becoming a better person, we're seeing the process of him even just showing a shred of empathy for people. And here's the thing: while empathy is the first step to wanting to become a better person, that's only the first step. And it's only when Daffy does start, and after Daffy starts feeling empathy for people, he basically just goes, I'm a changed duck, I'll be a better person, I'm going to give all my employees raises, how do they get vacations and all that stuff. And I'm just sitting here thinking, that's a big leap from point A to point B. Now, I'm willing to give the special some kudos on this. I'm willing to lay off it a little bit, because you could argue that this is Daffy coming off of the high of knowing that he's not going to die, and combined with feeling that empathy, he probably feels like $1 million right now, and through that high, he's feeling a bit more generous, and it's only when he comes off that high that he starts realizing, oh, I'm losing money here. How do I fix this? But So at the very least, you could argue that that's the reason why he goes all gung ho and wanting to become a better person, even after the visitor from the Ghost of Christmas Future. But even then, I still find it to just be a big stretch to go from oh, I can be loved and appreciated, and I think I want to change to I'm a changed person and I'm a good guy now. I don't know. It just feels like a very big leap in my opinion, and as a result, that's where I feel like the special falters. As a Looney Tunes cartoon, I think Bah Humduck is honestly genuinely good. It nails what makes these characters likable. The animation is really nice. The comedy is superb and does make me laugh. But where it falters, in my opinion, the most is with the Christmas Carol adaptation. Now, I'm not saying that the Christmas Carol adaptation is completely heartless, as I did just list several comments that I liked about it. I like that they do give reasons for why Daffy is as stagnant as he is, why he's such an asshole. And honestly, I liked the moments with Priscilla and how those moments were the impetus for Daffy wanting to change. So I think that was genuinely nice. It's just that because the special was so focused more on the Looney Tunes side of things, it neglected the Christmas Carol side of things. And I'm not saying that a Looney Tunes cartoon shouldn't have that kind of slapstick in there. It's Looney Tunes. You need the slapstick if you want people to like what you're doing. It's just that I feel like it should have balanced both elements better. It should have been able to balance the comedy and slapstick with the heart and care that a Christmas Carol should have. And as a result, while I think that this special on its own is pretty good, what keeps me from saying it's great is that as a Christmas Carol adaptation, it falters in too many areas. It's not a train wreck by any means, because when it does because like I said, you understand why Daffy is the way he is, and the heartfelt moments, the few they have, do genuinely work, and I think do lead to a nice arc with Daffy that lead him down the path of wanting to change. It's just that those elements go by too quick, were not emphasized on enough, and unfortunately, I feel like the leap from Daffy finally feeling empathy for other people is too big of a leap to wanting to changing all together. So, unfortunately, while I think that Bah Humduck overall is a pretty good special, it does still have its faults in it. It's not bad by any means, and if you wanted to watch it, I wouldn't stop you, but I will say that there are better specials out there. Again, this isn't bad in and of itself. If you want to watch this, I wouldn't stop you, and I do genuinely think that you would like it. There's enough in here to like. I just do have my own personal problems with it that keep me from fully enjoying it. So, again, not a bad special in itself, honestly pretty good, but also pretty flawed, and I do kind of give the special the side eye for a few things. So, yeah, take that for what it's worth. If you disagree with me, that's fine. I'm not trying to ruin your Christmas here. I'm just here to state my opinions. But regardless, though, that's how I feel, and yeah. So, yeah, that's really all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the video regardless. I'm Samuel Johnson, and, well, I hope you tune in next year for the next video. And Merry Christmas, everyone. God bless you all.